The next slide, please. The world is, as it was created, is very beautiful and perfect. This is the Amazon. Next. This is the Masai Mara. This is next. This is sunset on the Serengeti. Next. This is the Okavanga Delta. Next. This is the Irrawaddy River. Nope, that's okay, just leave it. Most of us are concerned about the environment. We know it's getting worse, but most of us don't know exactly what is happening on this creeping climate deterioration. This, you see, is a smog-filled Beijing. Next. This speaks for itself. It's on a riverbank. Changes in the environment have been gradual. We can't see it or feel its effects all the time. This is a slow-moving environmental freight train. It's subtle, so we don't even realize it's happening, but it's gaining speed, and it is bad. All of us are living in a world that's becoming less and less habitable. The major reasons are climate change and environmental damage to the air, water, and land. In the next few minutes, I'm going to give you a broad overview of the climate change, its causes, and what we can do. Next. Climate change. What exactly is it? In a nutshell, climate change refers to the changes of the average weather conditions over several decades. More of the sun's heat and more atmospheric gases are being absorbed, and so the planet is getting warmer. What is environmental damage? It means that all the ecosystems are thrown out of their natural balance. It means that human behavior has severely disrupted the stability on everything on Earth: species, land, bodies of water, the atmosphere. It means that human activities have caused serious damage and pollution of the environment. It means that weather patterns and climate have become more severe and volatile. It means that global ecosystems have changed, and they affect everything from the places we live, to the water we drink, to the air we breathe. So let's take a broad overview of the causes, effects, and possible solutions to this worldwide environmental problem. I've tried to condense the facts, but it's important to have an idea of the breadth and depth of the problem. So here we go. Next. Almost 100% of the constant damage to the environment is a result of increased population, economic development, and changes in cultural and social norms. In other words, we human beings have inflicted this damage on ourselves. Humans are the only species on Earth whose population keeps growing beyond an ecosystem's ability to support it. With all other species, overpopulation results in dying out until the environment can accommodate it. Human beings have overcome this natural limitation. We have been able to manipulate the ecosystems to accommodate our needs, and we have manipulated it and produced global warming, biodiversity loss, pollution, acidification, warming of oceans, and ecological collapse. Increases in the world population are the biggest driver of global warming, pollution, and environmental damage. World population growth has generated increased needs and demands for food, transportation, infrastructure, urbanization, water, energy, and consumer goods. Increases in industry and commerce have depleted more resources. Increases in population have converted more land for residential and agricultural use and increased water usage. All these factors have resulted in the uses of fossil fuel, deforestation, industrialization, transportation infrastructure, and waste disposal. every one of these human carbon footprint activities has increased global warming, pollution, and stresses on our natural ecosystems. We human beings have used the Earth's resources as if we're the only species that has the right to use them. We have used resources as if the supply is unlimited. We have and continue to use what is called a linear pattern of resources. We extract a resource, convert it for use, consume it, and then throw it away when we no longer want it or use it. This practice has resulted in an accumulation of waste and depletion of non-renewable resources. Many man-made products that are discarded when their usefulness is finished and whose residual material do not decompose quickly or easily are another source of waste. The linear pattern of behavior by human beings violates the natural system. In a natural and balanced ecosystem, there is no waste. Everything is used by some member of an ecosystem, and there is a circular use of these resources. Because of human exploitation of natural resources, there are very few places left on Earth where natural ecosystems maintain a healthy balance. Next slide, please. Yes, next slide, please. This is the Amazon. Next. This is the Amazon. Next. This is the Amazon. Next.
Next.
This is the Gobi Desert. It is absolutely untouched. Next. 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 This is the Galapagos, which is very protected and very, very untouched. Next. 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 The Masai Mara in the Serengeti is one of the other places. I showed you a slide at the very beginning. You don't have to go back. It has barely been changed in 1 million years. If there's a kill on the savannah, for example, there's no remnant of the kill within 24 hours or less, down to the last bone remnant. So the warnings of the degrees of damage next slide, are not abstract. Researchers have found that 40 to 50% of the Earth's surface has been degraded. 60% of the marine fisheries have been overfished. 30% increase in carbon dioxide since industrialization, and 25% of the bird population is now extinct. Next. What are the causes of the damage? As you can see, we humans are the primary cause of environmental damage and climate change. Let's just summarize those. Increased population, increased agriculture, deforestation, industrialization, increased infrastructure, increased urbanization, increased consumer goods, energy, transportation, and increased waste. They have all defined our carbon footprint and have disrupted our natural ecosystems and have caused major environmental deterioration. Let's look at some of these pollutants and their effects on the environment. Next, please. Here's the pollutants that are interrelated. Let's look at greenhouse gases. Do I have a greenhouse? They are generated by human activity that have interfered with the energy balance of the Earth and the leading cause of global warming. How do we produce greenhouse gases? We burn fossil fuels, we clear cut forests, we add chemical fertilizers to the soil, which produces nitrous oxide emissions. We raise livestock like pigs, cattle, sheep, buffalo, which produce major methane. We're producing fluorinated gases in our industrial processes, and all these factors interfere with normal cycling. Human generated sources of greenhouse gases are transportation, electricity, industry, commercial and residential property, and agriculture. What does all this mean? Next slide, please. We've done, yep. Next. There you go. The natural sinks like forests, soil, land, and water have been altered so much they're unable to absorb the increased levels of greenhouse gases. As you know, trees are great absorbers of carbon dioxide. But because we've cut down so many trees, there aren't enough left to serve as sinks. In addition, when you cut down trees, it releases the carbon dioxide that has been stored in the trees. So the clear cutting forest has a big impact on soil conditions, water cycles, as well as the carbon dioxide. And since the trees hold water and topsoil in place, clear cutting results in hundreds of miles of root systems that can no longer hold the soil. Unstable soil leads to landslides, soil erosion, silt deposits in bodies of water, excess nutrients in bodies of water, decreased fertility, and disruption of the biogeochemicals cycles. In land, when it has been cleared, the irrigation has become the biggest consumer of water. Chemical fertilizers have changed the chemical balance of the soil, and monoculture has depleted important nutrients necessary for agriculture. The ecosystem's thrown out of balance. It impacts both the biodiversity of plants and animals and the ability to meet food needs of our populations. If droughts and increased heats are taken into account, many areas of the world now having difficulty growing staple crops will need to transform to either new crops or abandon crops altogether. Now, the air we breathe has also been affected by global warming. Sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides from fossil fuels, vehicles, oil refineries, exhaust from cars are emitted into the atmosphere. What happens? They are converted into acid rain. Acid rain settles into the aquatic ecosystems like streams, lakes, waters, oceans, and the acid rain leaches aluminum from the soil and removes nutrients from the soil. The nitrogen in the acid rain pollutes the coastal waters and creates hypoxia, which kills the fish population. The acid rain, when it deposits into the water, creates huge amounts of carbon dioxide in the oceans. What happens when the carbon dioxide is dissolved in the ocean water? It becomes a weak acid and creates an acidification of the ocean. The warmer the ocean water gets, causes the depletion of nutrients and enough marine species to cause other species to migrate northward. Coral reefs lose their ability to dissolve oxygen when the ocean temperature rises, so they die. Major coral reefs like the Great Barrier Reef in Australia and reefs in India and Fiji are all facing extinction. 67% of the northern portion of the Great Barrier Reef has already died. This short survey of the anthropogenic activities of the environment shows that every ecosystem in the world has been damaged by greenhouse gases, clearing of forests, chemicals in industry, manufacture, and agriculture, urbanization, and pollution of water and land. The transformation of these ecosystems and its impact on biodiversity is a direct consequence of human modification of our land, sea, and air. The greatest damage, however, is biodiversity. Next slide, please. Biodiversity is the basis of ecosystems, populations, species, and genes. The number of species that can survive in a specific ecosystem is determined by the resources, the food, and the energy. Changes to any of these can affect the ecobalance and ultimately the existing biodiversity of a given ecosystem. Biodiversity provides vital benefits such as air purification, bioenergy, clean water bodies, and soil fertility. The general view is that ecosystems with greater numbers of different species are stronger than those with fewer, because more species strengthening ecosystems' resiliency and ability to adapt to changes. Ecologists have estimated there are 1.7 million species that have been identified and another 10 to 30 million that exist that haven't been described. In 2020, the United Nations Environmental Program estimated that 150 to 200 species become extinct every 24 hours. That's 41% of the amphibians, 25% of the mammals, 14% of the birds, 33% of the coral reefs, 27% of the crustaceans, and 26% of the primates are endangered. Next, please. Here are some of the endangered species on the list. The northern white rhino. Next, the orangutan. Next, the Bactrian camel. So where are we and what do we do to alter or destroy natural habitats? Human beings have created this environmental crisis. We built communities, structures, and products. We use huge amounts of non-renewable energy. We have clear-cut forests for timber. We have cleared land for agriculture and urban sprawl. We've used fertilizers and chemicals that pollute water. We've produced heat island effects with high-density cities. We've decreased biodiversity of both plants and animals, and we've produced mountains and mountains of solid waste. Next slide, please. The concerns for our environment. Although we are not very good stewards of the earth, we have been very aware of global warming and pollution. I know all of us are concerned. Concern about the deterioration of the environment is not new. There have been efforts to repair the environment, but they have been outpaced by the momentum of economic growth and the depletion of natural resources without regard for the health of the environment and the world population. Since 1960, more than 500 international agreements have been signed. They have been intended to stem the deterioration of the environment. The most ambitious, which we all know about, was in December 2015 with the Paris Accord. Its primary goal was to limit global warming to less than 2 degrees centigrade and zero net greenhouse gases by the second half of the 21st century. Like other treaties, however, this one has no binding commitments. There are no enforcement mechanisms. And unless there are these commitments and enforcements, this treaty, like all the others, will be symbolic. What has happened since this 2015? They have failed to stop or slow the increase in greenhouse gases. The two biggest offenders remain the United States and the People's Republic of China. And the 2019 COP25 meeting in Madrid again failed to agree on rules and pledges to set their own targets and timetables for reining in greenhouse gases. The fact that the United States and other big polluters like Brazil, Australia, China, and India blocked the adoption of greenhouse gas emission targets underscores again the increased climate generated storms, floods, landslides, heat waves, droughts, and endangered underdeveloped countries. Even attempts to establish funding to help poor countries has failed. Last week, President Biden had a meeting with 40 world leaders about climate change. He was looking for pledges to decrease greenhouse gases by the year 2030. Australia, India, Indonesia, Mexico, and Russia refused to make any pledges to decrease their use of oil, gas, or coal. So, as you can see, world treaties have been largely ineffective because individual countries have placed their economic growth and self-interest ahead of global benefit. Industry lobbies and their financial and political strengths have influenced public policies in their favor. What we as a community or individuals can do to stem environmental destruction is incremental, but a very important signal that we citizens care deeply about the future of the earth. This is a grim picture of the future. Despite all the evidence in the treaties and despite all the research and proposed solutions, climate change is getting worse with ever increasing air and water pollution, soil and ocean degradation, and ecosystem decline. That said, let's look at a few possible remedies each of us can contribute to slowing climate change. Next slide, please. The best solution is ecomimesis. It is a design and use strategy that uses the natural ecosystem as a template. It prepares and preserves natural ecosystems. It can be used in both the built and unbuilt environment, and it uses the circular process of using resources. Next slide, please. Here are some of the examples of ecosystem, and you can read them all, but I'm going to just highlight some. We can design wastewater and sewage treatment and recycling systems so the waste is treated at the source and doesn't flow into the water sources. We can capture storm runoffs, reusing municipal wastewater for irrigation. We do that here in Barnstable. We can design bioswales. You can keep rolling this. You can, yes. We can, yeah. We can design bioswales and retention ponds. We can use renewable resources only at the rate at which they can renew themselves. And importantly, we need to design for reassembly. And that means you can use those same resources that were used to build a building again when you either readapt the building or build a new building, so that we have a very efficient use of materials. We can design for adaptive use of buildings. We can harvest rain for water conservation. We can build green belts around towns and cities. We can establish mini parks in towns and cities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here are some individual things that we can do. We can go green. We can use non-toxic cleaning products like baking soda, lemon, and vinegar. We can use LED light bulbs instead of regular ones. We can establish xeriscape landscaping on your property, which uses very little water. We can plant trees to serve as sinks for carbon. We can include garden plants that attract keystone species, and we can build bioswales. Next slide, please. Here are some other things that we can do by being smart consumers. We can consume less. We can reduce waste. We send 250 million tons of trash annually to landfills. 30 to 40% of it is food waste. The cost of raising, harvesting, and producing, processing, marketing, and consuming food has been a major source of our individual carbon footprints. Perhaps we could consume more of the food that we buy. Maybe we can eat more plant-based foods. And you can see from that list. Next, these ecomimetic solutions are examples of design paradigms that demonstrate the feasibility of restoring the natural balance in the whole environment. Ecomimesis can help do that. Humans cannot indefinitely sustain a civilization that depletes and degrades the Earth's human capital. The Earth is our home planet. We need to repair, and preserve